our session. In today's session, we'll dive in a little more into the process of Dedicated Locator. I'll provide a quick presentation to start, and once again, this is an open forum, so feel free to share any questions, thoughts, concerns, and experiences with the new deal, with the new legal deal model that we have in place. Obviously, from our first session here, our goal is in these sessions to spark communication between the members, ourselves, regarding the new deal model as we continue to transition industry-wide. We have a large group here, and we have had many interactions with most of the individuals in this call. So please do share your experiences and feedback throughout these calls. So what I'll do is, like I said, I'll do a quick presentation, and we'll open up the forum at the end. In our last session here, we were under the GoToWebinar platform. As you can see here now, we are on a different platform. We are under the Teams webinar. So bear with us here as this is our first time around using this format. So if there's any technical difficulties, just bear with us here. But once again, if we can just keep everyone on mute until we complete the presentation. And then towards my end of presentation, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, share your questions, concerns, or any other experience. And also just to point out on this session here, on the top button there, if you are not able to share your questions through voice, then you can type in your question. There is a Q&A button on top. If you click on that, you can type in your questions that you may have, and one of our team members will be able to read that through for the group here to answer. Okay, so we'll get started here. Just a quick recap, just a recap to the previous session and kind of going through the DL requirements per party involved in the process. Once again, just kind of highlighting the project owners. The requirements for project owners are to submit the 90-day notice form to Ontario One Call, contract and approve DLSP, notify Ontario One Call when the project is complete or any updates that's requiring throughout the project so that we can relay that information to all parties involved. Under the member section, this is for you guys in terms of members, is to comply with the Onus Act, agree upon the selected DLSP, provide infrastructure records mapping within the 10 business days, ensure mapping is up to date. And Ontario One Call, what we're looking at here from our side of things, when we receive the notification form from the DL submission form, we are to identify members within the vicinity of the within the work described, notify affected members of the proposed DL project, and we are the liaisons to all parties involved here, so project owners, members, and DLSP. When we look at the DLSP here, their main requirements here is to reach out to members, identify within the project limit to obtain the mapping, and from there as well too, they complete the locates within 10 business days or as per instructed timeframe set by the project owner or proponent. Just another recap from our previous webinar session here, most specifically is to what type of projects that we are accepting under Dedicated Locator projects. On the left-hand side here, we are looking at the DL project. What a DL project is a DL, it's a dig project on a single defined work area that does not extend outside of the prescribed limit. So samples of this, such as transit projects or road rehab, where the dig project is on a singular continuous stretch of road. So it's one stretch of dig area that they have. It's not in multiple pockets. When we look at on the right side here, we have a DL regional project request type. What this is multiple dig projects with multiple work areas that extends throughout the prescribed region. So, these are, this particular project type is where fiber to homes project or municipal capital projects where it expands multiple regions where they have multiple dig areas throughout the areas itself. So just going through how it works, this is somewhat of a brief level overview of how Dedicated Locator works. And of course, there are some internal, external process in between these overview steps. With the Act, there are some mandated broadband projects to partake in the Dedicated Locate model, but anyone that wants to partake can do so. The only areas that has to be considered are the costs involved around the Dedicated Locator, obviously. And then the project owner now takes on the cost of the Dedicated Locator, but in return, they are getting the full control. And in general, it takes away the load from the member in the public stream, but still ensures all requirement standards to safely locate your infrastructure. So it starts off with the project owner selecting a DLSP. Now, during this process, Ontario One Call DL team can provide assistance during the preliminary conversation. And at this point, we also encourage project owners and their projected DLSP to have those preliminary conversations with the affected members. What this do is it helps all parties involved to get a head start and prepare for the upcoming DL project request before it formalizes, the process itself through a submission. Now, what we look at here is the DLSP needs to make sure that they have fulfilled the basic requirements as per, the non-lack framework. Now, we're going to go in discussion here of what that framework will look like. That the DLSP framework is now available in our webpage, so that's something that you can reference back on terms of that. And we're also going more so, we'll give you an overview to what that framework would look like. But the idea around this framework is that there has to be a certain level of competency for locators out there. We just don't want anyone without any experience or any training to locate a member's underground infrastructure. Industry-wide, we all have common goals surrounding safety and safe dig practice. So that's the reason why we had to put this in place to ensure that we cover the base requirements of most members that's to safely locate your infrastructure. So with the selection of the DLSP, the project owner established an agreement with the DLSP. Now this is common for business practice where it's set forward the project requirements, liability, and such with the DLSP. And when we look at the step 3 here, step 3, the project owner can then formalize the DL request for their project through a submission of a request notice form to our DL team. Now, this request notice form is it's available onto our webpage. We do have a recent updated form that we will be updating onto our webpage today. So if you are a member and a project owner as well too, they want to get an updated form, you may want to look into our webpage there, or you can reach over to our team. We can provide you that. Now going with that, with the DL team, when we receive that notification or that submission notice, the DL team then extracts that information and provide that information that's provided in the DL request notice form to determine and provide the affected member list and the and that affected member list to the project owner and the DLSP. So what we do is we capture the scope of work, the regions or the areas that they'll be working to, and we produce a member list that we share with the project owner and DLSP. Within around the same timeline, the DL team also provide a DL project acknowledgement email to the affected members. Once a member received this DL project acknowledgement email, this is to which we provide guidance for the members' next step into the DL process. The member and the project owner have 10 business days to be in agreement. This could be in a form of written form of a DLSP presented for the project. So when we say in a written form, it could be in as simple as providing a response to the DL project acknowledgement email. That's sufficient enough for you to acknowledge that that notification and agreement of the DLSP or the project itself. Should there be any concern of the selection, we encourage you to contact our team immediately so we can provide assistance and be the liaison for that concern and the submission itself if there's any in terms of the member side or the project owner side. Now, once we have provided the DL project acknowledgement to the members, the DLSP can now then reach out to the member and establish an agreement. Now, this agreement could be similar to an MSA or such, which contains requirements, escalation process, liability, and so on to safely locate the member's infrastructure. Members of the Dedicated Locator Working Committee have brought forth a sample draft agreement for members and DLSP. So if you require, a foundation or a draft template for what this agreement could look like, contact our DL team. It's something that we can provide you and review with you as a copy of this. So once that's established, the DLSP can now obtain mapping and standards required to complete the locates. Obviously, once you have the agreement set in place, now, in between the steps and process, so once the DLSP and the member have that agreement in place, the trainings and standards all set in place, basically the DLSP and the members all set to go ahead and complete the the locates on behalf of the member. There is a member authorization form that will be required of a sign off and agreements. Basically indicating that both the member and the DLSP have acknowledged, the Dedicated Locator project, have all the required trainings and mapping required for them to proceed with the project itself, and that's submitted through Ontario One Call. And lastly, once that's all completed there, we provide a green light to the project, and the DLSP and the member are all provided with the notification of the project, going forward with the green light. And the DLSP can now start the project and complete locates as to when and where the project owner requires. So just a quick sample here of what the submission form looks like. This is the new form that we have recently produced. So once again, this is an updated version that we have. So there may be the older version that's circulating around, where in previous version, we do have two separate forms that distinguish between the two different type of projects that we accept under Dedicated Locator. But now we do have a singular form here where you can choose which project that you require for your notice. It does have all the information there where it comes up with the project information, where it has the project owner information, contact information, secondary information for the contact, project name, project number, and whatnot. They have the project start date as well too. Now, in some cases where you see some of this submission as a member, there may be some dates that are earlier than the 90 days or even previous dates itself. What those are most likely projects that may have existing Dedicated Locator program set in place, or an existing projects that's already up and running, where they're just transitioning it over to a Dedicated Locator model. So there may be some cases where these dates may not align within the 90-day notice. So that in that case, we do provide a notice on there that this is a transitional project that is going to a Dedicated Locator model. So we will work with all parties to ensure that that transition goes through smoothly. We also see the project completion date. With this one's obviously we look at the project completion date. For members to be aware to when the project is set forward to when its estimated end date. Under the under our process as well too is that we do provide we do obtain an update to the project owner every 90 days of the project itself to ensure that if any updates are required, any updates towards the project, end dates and whatnot, we do have that touch point every 90 days. And if there's any changes or the project has ended, we do notify the members immediately to ensure the access and also, the DLIDs that's created under that particular project is no longer in use and not, available forward in terms of once the project is completed. Now, as the second part of the form here, we have the Dedicated Locator service provider information. So the selected Dedicated Locator service provider, they'll provide information, primary and contact, secondary contact information. At the bottom there, we do have the authorized parties. What the authorized parties are civil vendors that the project owners may have on board that they are authorizing the use of their DL model, or in some cases where they may have internal users where they'll be the ones calling in the locates itself. So that information will be provided to here for the members to review back to who the civil vendors will be included or involved onto this project. On the right-hand side here, you can see the form where it has the project location. So it's just the base information of where the region they're working, municipalities that we're working at, and any other further details that may be required towards that. Now, as a member receiving this, a map may not be included to it or within the initial acknowledgement email. That is something for a member to reach over to the project owner to obtain a detailed mapping if should you require more further information. So that is, this is something that we encourage all parties to have that transparency to ensure that they can reach over to that. And hence the reason why we have the purpose of the contact information of the project owner. So that way the members can reach out to the project owner to obtain detailed mapping if we require. Now in the project scope box here is just sample information to estimate of their type of works that they're doing, methodology of the type of work, and other additional information that is that is required or not required, but like more so information for members towards this project itself, any special information that's required to there. Now we're just going to look at, I did talk about it a little bit with the member authorization form and what this looks like. This form is something that's applied by that we provide the Dedicated Locate service provider as a template, and the Dedicated Locate service provider will be providing these to the members once they complete, once they obtain the agreement, mapping standards and training. Basically, this is a sign off authorizing the suppression of your station code away from the public, the public stream or public notification, and be suppressed into the dedicated locator model itself and going directly to the dedicated locator service provider. So that this is what this form is. It just stipulates that once both parties are in agreement and have all the required trainings and access and whatnot to complete the locate on your behalf, then this sign-off form will indicate to Ontario One Call that you guys are ready with the dedicated locate service provider. We will suppress your station code, so therefore you will no longer be receiving it on the public stream, and it will be directed to the dedicated locate service provider for them to go ahead and proceed to locate the infrastructure for that project itself. Now, here is just an updated best practice that we do have that we recently produced for underground infrastructure owners. This information is available to our webpage. I just wanted to give you guys a brief snippet to what this looks like. And once again, this is a good resource for you to have and to keep on the side there if it's available onto our webpage. It's just to go through, what you need to know, where you can find resources, benefits of dedicated locator, and just kind of best practice recommendation that we have surrounding dedicated locator towards a infrastructure owner. So I did touch point a little bit on the previous slides here regarding the pathway for non-LAC LSPs and additional locating resources and how that's looking at. So we did recently get the approval and the review from the ministry with this, and also with that being said, it is now available to our webpage to what this framework looks like. So if you can go to our webpage to download this or reach over to our team, we can certainly happily to provide you this information, what this framework would look like. Basically, it's something that we work through with most of our high-risk infrastructure owners and kind of just seeing what the base level requirements is to look into becoming a dedicated local service provider. So the first thing we will look at is technical requirements, damage tracking softwares such as IS Networld, which will host repository data for damage prevention purposes. Now, other members may have different damage tracking software, so that's something that you would just share with the DLSP at that point. Obviously, now we're looking at as well too is the ticket management software. This is to receive locates requests coming in. It's no longer going to be coming in through a member side of notification. It is going directly to the dedicated locate service provider to receive that locate request, taking away the load off from the public stream and taking away the load from as a member at this point. So therefore, you're not in compliance. You're not be involved into completing that locate, sending out your own resource and whatnot, or going to your notification that is strictly going to the dedicated locate service provider to go ahead and proceed to locate. We're also looking at the mapping system, such as Plan View or any member Pacific. This is something that obviously the member and the DLSP will look at and how you can best provide your mapping, your best available mapping that you can provide the dedicated locator service provider to ensure that they can safely locate your infrastructure. We'll look at as well too is the business requirement. We only have one thing in there, is insurance. Straightforward common business practices where there are high risk liabilities involved. So, insurance requirements is there for as a business requirement. What we're looking at here is the locator requirements, training, QC, and QA. As mentioned in the previous slides, we also have having conversation with stakeholders to what this training would be, would be like, whether or not it's direct from a LAC LSP or through ORCGA. Also, there may be some member-specific training or requirements. So, these are what we're looking at in terms of getting on board possible dedicated local service provider for additional training or requirements of training. Now, another steps into a pathway for a non-LAC LSP that we can look at is a locator partnership. The locate partnership, there are many forms of this currently happening where we often see large excavation groups have in-house locators or have partnership agreements with, existing LSPs to provide the training system requirements or QA to meet the standards of, of owners of high-risk infrastructures. This pathway ease the timeframe required for a LSP to work as a DLSP while they build up and establish all requirements to go on its own as a DLSP. And last, what we are looking at here is the registered of approved non-LAC LSPs. Just to be clear, just to be clear across the board here, Ontario One Call does not provide the approval of the DLSP. This is still with the member to provide of the approval of the DLSP. With more locating resources become available, what does this registry look like? Where it's going to be located? Which entity will would host this registry? All these conversations we are facing today with industry wide itself. So with that, ending in my presentation here, just to provide everyone a short list here that we have that are active DLSP, just for your reference. We have on the left-hand side here our active DLSPs that are currently active in a DL project and existing. We on the right-hand side here, we are looking at some of the LSPs that are close and having these conversations currently right now that are coming close to becoming a DLSP at this point and have projects on hand, and it's just kind of final preliminary conversations with several members itself. So now, with that being said, I see there's several questions already on our Q&A message board here. If you have any questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself, where we can share our experiences, questions, and concerns. I'll leave the board in open forum now, and we'll proceed with the Q&A. Okay, I believe we have our, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, hi, Marco, it's Christine. Yeah. I'll ask the question from the Q&A. Question is, does the 90-day notification apply if you are optionally opting into a dedicated locator program for select utilities that are already covered by a DLSP?
I'm trying to understand this question more. My apologies, doesn't it? Would Jeff, are you able to go on the voice right now to kind of just further explain that question to what you're looking at in there in terms of the notification, or if it's optionally opting out for the dedicated program? The way I'm reading.
So my understanding, it's Jeff here.
Yeah.
My understanding is that there's different, there's requirements for an 90-day or requirements for a dedicated locator in certain projects, but sometimes we can optionally opt into a dedicated locator program for a project if we choose to, and we can just do select utilities, for instance, like gas and hydro. And if you're going to hire a DLSP, can you hire them?
Okay, so you're speaking of as if you're a project owner. You're looking at the project owner side of things. Okay, so under a dedicated locator model, you're looking at the new model itself. There is the legal requirements for all members. Okay, so under the new model itself, we are providing notifications to all members. What that occurs is that all members are compliant to go under the dedicated locator model. Now, there's some cases where, depending on the project scope, project location, where these members may be notified but may not have the infrastructure directly onto your location. So let's say if you're going on a regional case of dedicated locator model, so you're going regional, but your pockets of area may not affect this particular member. So there may be an option for that member to say that they are clear, and this is, I'll be clear in this one, that they can provide you a notification based on the project maps that you provide where your work is, that they can provide to say that they do not have infrastructure within your project scope or within your indicated project scope. Therefore, they are clear to not proceed with your dedicated locator. And from that case, and what we can look at is that on a project side of things is that if you do come across, their infrastructure, and you start seeing that it does start coming across to most of your locus that you call in, or your scale, your project scope changes in an area where now it does involve them, it still provides them back again to have those conversations back again, saying, now your infrastructure is now involved. Can we please have a discussion regarding going into a dedicated locator? So it still involves not within the 90 days, but within the 90 days, obviously they're looking at if their infrastructure is involved or within the project scope itself that they can say that they are clear of. But within the project, once it starts, once it starts rolling out and it does affect their infrastructure, it's something that we can refer back with your original notice.
Okay, I have a question actually. Can you please explain what was the issue that was happening before this whole program for dedicated locator was put in place, and what is it designed to improve on?
Okay, so on our the previous model, and we call this legacy dedicated locator model now. Okay, the previous model and dedicated locator, and it has been out in the industry for quite a while now. There's different type of models, different type of platforms to how it looks like. But what that looks like and what these models look like, they're all voluntary basis. What that means is that there's only selected members that may agree upon it, and there's several ones that may not agree upon it. Now, the issue is, as a project owner, there is that inconsistency of receiving a full valid locate package, or even having that completion to start their dig project. And within even having a dedicated locator model, legacy model, then they may have the locate on time for the portions that have agreed under their dedicated locator, but the other members that have not agreed upon with may not have the locate on time, and in that cases the package itself falls out of place and it doesn't align with the project scope itself.
But we as
Yeah.
members, if
Mhm.
we are providing the locate within the 5 business days,
Mhm.
and we are our own dedicated locator, because we
Mhm.
have access to all our maps and all of the information that we need
Mhm.
to give to the excavator with all of the conditions that we need to put and
Mhm.
explain. So in that case, it makes us the best people for the job.
Yes,
So
under,
then are we still liable to go through a dedicated locator?
understood. So if you look at it in your perspective there, there's such projects, broadband projects coming through, and this is what the bill was. I mean, this is what the act was set for. As one of it is to building broadband faster act itself. So with the IO broadband projects. With your areas there, your coverage area, you may look at some broadband projects coming through your side of things where now the demand of locates, you're looking at almost, you're looking at hundreds to thousands of locates within weeks that's coming through your end. Can you be in compliance within the 5 days with that amount of locates and under the demand of your locates? So those are the things that you may look at. Right now, yes, on a standard process, if you're not affected on a large scale project that's coming through your side, you may be in compliance within the 5 days. But once you have a heavy load or large scale projects coming through your side, such as a fiber to home project, where now they're demanding the locates,
Sure,
that
but
hundreds of.
so far since Ontario, since we've joined
Mhm.
Ontario One Call since 2014, we've
Mhm.
never had that issue. So are you saying that something like that may happen in the future?
Yes, well, that's what the project itself and dedicated locator project itself. My main example is obviously broadband projects are coming across. Everyone wants to install their fibers all the way across Ontario itself, and it's a race to the act to which ISP can complete that. So, and part of major problem is locates. Hence the reason why dedicated locate kind of came through in place in this case. Now, like I said, the demand for the locates for these projects are very high. Now, resources coming from your side, you are supplying that resources. You are now, hold against compliance. If you do not meet that 5 days, there is an amp
Sure,
compliance
sure,
around to it now.
but we have been meeting that, right? And what I'm saying is that the dedicated locator may not have all of the information and
And
awareness of what's really involved, and there can be a lot of risks. In fact, if they're not really updated with, they don't have the updated like detailed information.
Mhm.
So, and the other thing is that, like for instance, what I understand is Toronto Hydro can have a dedicated locator, Toronto, whatever, gas can have one. So each of them, so are we required to deal with multiple dedicated locators and provide them like information to all the different dedicated locators?
Yes, pretty much. Yes, for each project, they may have their own separate dedicated local service provider. Um, the way we're looking at it, and you got to look at it as a member perspective, is that right now you're providing your own resources. You're held against for Compliance Act, and you're against, in terms of the demands of this project. Dedicated locator is they're providing that resource, taking that away from your public load, so you're not held against the compliance side of things to complete those tokens all the time. Now, what you're saying is that you have standards, you have requirements, you have certain training specifically for your infrastructure to be located safely, and you may have your own in-house locator or a service provider.
Yes.
That same format, you'll be providing that to the dedicated local service provider as well too. Hence the reason why there is that 90 days is because
Except
within
it's not a fixed format, because on each case, on each location and each work type, there's like there's a lot of records that we know where to access what, and it's impossible to give the entire archives to someone because they wouldn't know actually exactly where to look for it.
Okay, so and then that's something that you can have a discussion with the
Yes,
DLSP,
I
how
think
you
we do
you,
need
you can
to.
you can
Yes.
have that stage, right? So
Yeah.
to sort off to say this is that it's not a black and white process where once a dedicated locator project comes through, you're relieving all your mapping to them. There is that sense of transparency between the project owner, the DLSP, and you as a member to all collaboratively work and ensure that you are providing the mapping that's required within their project scale, whether or not it's in stages. Now, there are options as well too. I understand that timelines are stringent and also some cases may not be applicable within the 10 days or even the 90 days. There's some cases here where if it's such a large scale area, you may be able to provide them in stages, working hand in hand with the DLSP and the project owner. As long an alternative timeline is provided and agreements between you and the project owner to how you can provide this mapping, that is acceptable towards the act itself. So that could be another that could be another option that you may look at. That yes, your mapping may be quite large. Maybe get into and have that discussion with the project owner and the member to say where will you be working at this stage and whatnot, kind of stage that off, and then from that point and you can go in agreement with them in written form to provide those mapping at different stages, as long all parties are
Right. In our case, actually, it's not as simple as just mapping. It has a lot to do with vertical clearances and vertical digging depths. So that is actually outside of like the mapping thing. It needs a lot of cross sections. And
this is something that you would put through your agreement with the dedicated locator service provider. So same thing, how that agreement will look like to the locate service provider that you do have on hand now or in-house wise. It's the same stipulation or foundation that you would put under a dedicated locator service provider under the agreement, where if you have certain system filter that's currently set up right now, you may want to apply that not apply that, but you may want to provide that information to the dedicated locator service provider where certain depth, certain certain type of work scope or whatnot, that they may be just clear for you. So all that can be translatable. So like I said, as long as you can have that information and you can share that upon with the dedicated locator, have that communication, that could be all transferable and put into your agreement.
And who pays the dedicated locator?
The project owner.
Okay. I think I'll let the other people ask questions. Thank you.
No problem. Our team here is available. So if you want to have an external call afterwards, please reach over to us and we can go in depth on this one. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. We have Sheila. Did I pronounce that name right? We have.
I already asked my question. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. Okay. We have Brian.
Yeah, it's Brian from Lakeland Power. My question's around the agreement between the project owner and the DSSP and the agreement between the infrastructure owner and the DLSP. Wouldn't it make more sense to have an agreement between the project owner and the infrastructure owner?
Well,
because really, you're leaving it up to the infrastructure owner to ensure that the DSLP that the project owner has hired is competent and capable of doing this work. Really, it should be between the infrastructure owner and the project owner. So if there, in fact, there is a dig-in, we're going after the project owner. We're not going after the dedicated locator. That's an agreement separate from that they can have between themselves, right?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question here. It's a valid question there. What you're looking at is there's two types of agreements here, and most cases we get that misconception because under the act there's two types of agreements within the 10-day. One is to agree on the DLSP, and the other one is obviously once you agree on the DLSP, provide the mapping and so on, whatnot. The first thing we want to look at is, the DLSP, on the member's perspective and the project owner, is that you can be in agreement of the DLSP selected. And keep in mind, the DLSPs being selected, there has to be a base level requirements based on that, and then the frameworks and whatnot. So there's preliminary conversation that occurs to that before they move on to the next process, formalizing the form. Now, when we're looking at the agreement in terms of service agreement, right, you're looking at who's locating your infrastructure at this point, which is the dedicated locator service provider. So the agreement could be, it should be stipulated towards the locate service provider in terms of, what your stipulation, how to locate your infrastructure, what the, sorry, for those that have their mute, please ensure you guys are mute. Okay, so sorry, going back to that one. So basically just having all the requirements that you may have specifically to safely locate your infrastructure, insurance-wise, liability-wise, you put that all into your service agreement to the dedicated locator service provider, because at the end of the day, they're the one locating the infrastructure. And in terms of locating your infrastructure, it's, there's stipulation between how your mapping is provided or what the mappings look like, escalation process where, if there is some query regarding the infrastructure, there's some concerns that's in regards that they can't locate it properly. What is the next process to that one? That is all should be stipulated into your agreement. Hence the reason why we recommend the member and the DLSP to have that agreement in place, so that way there's something to fall back to ensure they can safely locate your infrastructure.
Yeah, but who gets the bill when someone digs into something and we send the bill to the project owner and they say, well, it's out of our hands, your agreement's with the dedicated locator? So
we can't really speak on that behalf in terms of Ontario One Call. That's something between the DLSP and the project owner to have that conversation with. Unfortunately, it's not within Ontario One Call to kind of speak on that behalf.
That's a big hole, right? That needs to be filled, because if there's no recourse for the infrastructure owner to get retribution for any dig-ins,
and hence the reason why we advise you to have those conversations with all parties involved to it. So the dedicated local service provider and the project owner, to how that'll look like, whether or not that's stipulated to the agreement of the DLSP, and however they stipulate that from the DLSP side of things with the project owner itself.
But if we can't reach agreement, then we're in violation of the legislation.
You can have, if it even comes out to it, you can even have an agreement between the two parties. So you can have an agreement separately with the project owner. You can have an agreement set in place to locate your infrastructure with the DLSP. So
but then you're putting the onus back on the infrastructure owner, when the onus should all be on the project owner. Like
the onus,
you're adding more administrative work to the infrastructure owner when it doesn't need to be there. Like all this administration work should be going to the project owner. It's their project. They're the owner of the project.
I understood, but what what we're looking at in agreements with the DLSP is you providing the accurate mapping to the DLSP, or you providing them how to locate your infrastructure, what they're, what the escalation process is, or whatever sort that's required for your infrastructure. You need to put that in place as a recommendation.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but that is that doesn't cover the fact that there needs to be an agreement between the project owner and the infrastructure owner as well, because there are going to be dig-ins. We know that.
And once again, if you as a member, if you have that comfort level to have that between the member and the infrastructure owner, there could be two agreements between the two parties. Like I said, it's not something that we are governance around it.
Yeah, sorry, but then we're getting into the added administrative burden, right? Getting legal involved on two agreements when really we shouldn't need to go that far. It's really, this all should be put on the project owner. They're the ones that are getting the funding from the government to do these projects, and they should be taking on the burden of all the administration of administering this project.
Hi, I'll step in here just a little bit. So it's Adam Morden, the Director of Member Services here. So I think what Marco is saying is right, but I do hear your point there. I don't see it too differently to how the current system works today, that if there was a damage, so you're talking about a damage as a result of the excavation, there's not really too much of a difference in the current situation with the standard stream of locate requests and the dedicated locator stream, because obviously accurate locates have to be performed, and a locating company would assume the liability for completing those. Accurate mapping has to be provided to that locating company, and either that would be in the public stream, whether it's internal or to a third party. It's not too dissimilar to how it's dealt with on the dedicated locator front, but it's just this time it is only to a third party. And then obviously you've got the project owner for sure, but the excavation company will be obviously doing the excavation work and would be the ones that if a damage were to occur, they would be the ones that would have caused that damage. So all the same parties are involved. We've just introduced the aspect of a project owner in this situation.
Thank you, Adam,
Okay,
for that.
thank you.
Marco, sorry.
Yeah.
Lisa from EPCOR in Collingwood. Just have a question. Are we duplicating mapping work then as well? And like, how is suppression happening with the dedicated locator? Sorry, can you confirm that? Are we actually, if we sign this dedicated locator agreement, are those locates going to be suppressed so we don't even see them if the project owner has a locator? Like, we just are not really understanding the purpose of the dedicated locator, because we have 2 locator inspectors on staff. So it also leads into taking like work away from our union employees as well, taking away their overtime. If there's somebody that is contract that comes in and is a dedicated locator locating our own infrastructure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions that we have.
So to start off with, Lisa, to start off with, in terms of mapping, it's a mapping that you would be, it's your best mapping that you can possibly provide to a third-party locator to locate your infrastructure. So you just got to look.
Mapping to your Ontario One Call system is the best mapping that we have.
Okay, so
it's always updated. We always have to send the most accurate mapping to our customers.
Yeah.
Regardless, right? So that's where I'm kind of confused there. It's duplicating the work there. Sorry, but continue.
Yeah, so in terms of the dedicated locator model, in terms of suppression, you do not receive the notification on your end. So that's the second part of your question there, where in terms of notification, it's completely taken out of your public stream. It's completely taken out of your hand there, and it goes directly to the dedicated locator service provider. Hence the reason why we say under a dedicated locator model, you don't have the liability of, in terms of compliance, sending out your own resources of completing those locates and meeting the demand of the project, because that's taken out of from your side of things, and it goes directly to the dedicated locator service provider to locate that infrastructure. Obviously, once you proceed with, with the agreements of the model itself.
Like Brian said, if there's a dig-in, we need to know where that dig-in is, and we need to repair it. So that's the project owner and the dedicated locator. Like, how? So the dedicated locator is working for us or the project?
They're working for the project owner, but obviously they are servicing or locating your infrastructure on behalf of the project owner. So that's where it comes back to, there's different levels of agreements that you may want to stipulate onto your agreements with the DLSP to locate safely your infrastructure. Put those, stipulations based on that, and just like what Adam covered, based between the agreements, it could be both between both parties. But like I said,
that needs to be reviewed. I agree with Brian, and there's something that needs to be, I think, rejigged. I think is this the members talking about, are we forced to do this dedicated locator?
Under the legislation, yes, all members that are affected within the dedicated locator are compliant under the dedicated locator model.
That's really unfortunate. And you know what? Does it have to take somebody getting injured in a dig-in to maybe change this? I really don't agree with the safety aspect.
Now, I totally understand with the safety aspect of things, and this is what we're all here for. Is at the end of the day, our common goal is for safety. So, there is a high level of competency that we ensure that we filter through or look into just like what I said on my previous slides here, there is a framework set in place for dedicated located service provider. You're not just getting a locating service provider that just started last week to come on board on your dedicated locator
but
to
our
service this
staff
infrastructure at that
are-
point.
Yeah, our
And
staff are the qualified dedicated locators here.
and that's your locator based on your own services on that area. That's still on the public stream. So when we're speaking of a larger scale projects now coming through, is your staff able to maintain those demands by that
Absolutely.
project or multiple projects that's occurring all the way across, right? So those are the things we can look at. But Lisa, if you want to reach over to our team after this call, we can certainly set up a one-on-one call based on your concerns and whatnot, and hence the reason
Okay.
why we have this
And
call.
who, yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. And who do we speak to directly
It,
about our concerns?
Our email address is there, so you can email deal@ontarioonecall.ca.
So it's
we
just
would
a general, okay.
Yeah, we would certainly want to set up a call with you and your team to
I think
further
yeah.
discuss this information into it. And most of it is just a discussion that we can have to ensure that it's understand how it lays out all the way across the board. So you can certainly share your concerns based on that.
Yeah, and again, can we go to the last part of my question, which is the union issue?
Mhm.
I don't know
So-
if anybody else has issues with that, like, because we have our own locators here, and it's something that is going to have to be looked at. Is our union individuals will be having work taken away from them. So I'm not sure if in their contract this is something that can happen either. Like, do we need to? Was that considered?
Yeah, so with this one, what was communicated to us is that because this is a provincial law, it's legislated, it does actually supersede any union contract. So if you do have union employees, obviously this would supersede that requirement. So it would be allowed with the provincial law there. And I just want to double back because I want to reiterate something Marco just said. It really is quite important that safety and damage prevention is the #1 outcome that we want. And I know that you stated there that you don't think it is. It absolutely is. It's the reason that we are here. And certainly, anecdotally, at the moment, we're still trying to collect the data, but it's still early days. But certainly what we are seeing is actually dedicated locator is a safer way to go about excavation. We're seeing a significant drop in damages with dedicated locator projects than the same types of work when they were in the public stream. So this is appearing to be a safer method of excavation at this time. As I say, it is only anecdotal at this point, but certainly as soon as we get more of the data to back that up from the owners of underground infrastructure, then we will be sharing that with the industry as well.
Yeah, because I would challenge that only because, like I said, we have 2 in-house locators on staff that if we have to go with this dedicated locator agreement and we have locates that are suppressed, we need to know where these digs are happening, and they need to know.
Absolutely, and that can be part of any agreement that you have with the dedicated locator, that they inform you as and where they complete those locates. You can request copies of the completed locates. And at the same time, if you've got a level of standard that you would have for your own locator, then it can be reasonable for you to require in-house training for the dedicated locator to be at that level as well.
And who's paying for that training?
Well, that would be at your discretion.
Okay, well, I feel like you're for, like, all of the over 80 people who are on this call, I feel like you're forcing, clearly the province is forcing our hand to do this. We're just one little company. Anyway, continue. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So just to let you know, it is something that was put in it was legislated over a year ago now, and I know there was a consultation before that, and certainly the industry as a whole came back that it was a positive move. Obviously, not everyone's going to agree with that, and I can clearly see that you don't. And we are here to help that transition, but obviously Ontario One Call is here to fulfill the mandate that we've been given. And, so we're only trying to put forward the legislation that was put in place. And certainly the Dedicated Locator team are there to be a resource to help you out. And certainly, like Marco said, please do set up that one-on-one meeting, and we can go into this in greater detail. And then if you do have feedback, you're more than welcome to send it to myself, or you're also more than welcome to reach out to our ministry and discuss that feedback with them directly.
Thank you. Yeah.
That was a good segue into training. I've got a question about that, if you guys are willing to entertain that.
I don't know if we're asking these questions in order.
Clarify, are you guys still going through the raised hands and Q&A, or how are you addressing the questions?
Yeah, we can go ahead. I guess we'll because we have a lot of hands on hand here. We can start with Luca.
Okay, mine will be fairly quick. I think I'll agree with the other smaller members, which my organization is as well, that this adds a lot of administrative work. Establishing that agreement with our current LSPs and contractors is something that's been done, that works well. They know our infrastructure, and now trying to replicate that with any number of DLSPs is just going to be kind of a nightmare for us, but we'll see how that goes. My question is just one, that when we receive the request for authorization to sign, I'd like to raise, and I did in the last session too, right at the end, that mapping should absolutely be provided in that request, because the first email that's going back from that is, where's the mapping? And my question is, since we will not be signing anything until mapping's provided, how does that affect the 10-day deadline?
So with that being said, it is something that we are proactively having these discussions with project owners prior to them submitting those, the project notice itself. But also keep in mind that, you do have, you are able to respond back to those project owner or DLSP to provide you more details in terms of the information of the project itself. So it's not black and white where we send off the information.
Well, we do, but we don't hear anything back. So
and that's something.
How does that 10-day period?
So within that 10-day period, if you do not hear back from the project owner or DLSP, raise that awareness to us immediately, and that's something we can touch base with the project owner itself, and set up touch points and based on that to get that going for you guys. But definitely your first action there is obviously sending out that acknowledgement to start off with. If you require more details or information to it, send out that information. If you do not hear back within the day or two on that, raise that awareness to us. And then when you do respond all to that notification of the project acknowledgement, it is set up where you can hit reply all, where it does include all parties involved. So the project owner, DLSP, and our dedicated locator team. So we do see that information on hand there, and therefore we are able to follow up as well too. If you do not hear anything back from that project owner, then that's something you can touch base on us in terms of the communication.
Okay, because there is a big difference if you're a small member or large infrastructure member like Enbridge or someone else. For them, obviously, infrastructure is everywhere. But for us, the preference is to clear if possible, and we can only do that based on mapping.
Exactly. And that's a valid reason to that. So definitely reach over to the project owner immediately once you receive the notification, and get us involved in that case if we need to, and then we can get involved based on any request based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Luca. We have one here next is Wes.
So with regards to training for DLSP, because we do many infrastructure or service providers, we have locators on staff already as well too, right? But we also are involved with a lot of government projects as well that we're looking at becoming a DLSP, for primarily for our own projects, right? But we've noticed as well too, just in our preliminary reach out into various resources that we're aware of, there really isn't any what I'm going to call structured training available yet. That could, there's no roadmap that we can see unless someone can point me in the right direction on, how one who has 20 years of experience locating, their infrastructure and possibly other utilities as well too, but mostly their own. But then, where's that roadmap on becoming a DLSP and what hoops do you have to jump through to get there?
So that, to start off with, there's that framework that was recently introduced. So that framework was put together with multiple stakeholders involved and high-risk infrastructure owners involved to come up with that base level framework requirements to become a DLSP. Now, the second step to that, if you do meet those requirements, and you do have, that it meets what's the base level requirements that's stipulated onto the framework, then this is the next step that we do encourage is to reach over to us, have that conversation with our team here, possibly look at the project area that you may be looking into servicing, and from there we can get you connected to the members involved, the possible members that may be involved within your project scope, to have those preliminary conversations to what it looks like to you to transition under a DLSP. Those preliminary conversations are key at this point. If you're looking into that point, you can start speaking with high-risk infrastructure owners, where they can start requesting certain requirements that may take time for you to obtain, and if that's the case. So having these earlier conversations are key prior to going ahead and obviously proceeding to submitting a dedicated locator project. So once you have that set in place, at least you know where you stand based on the members that are affected within the areas there, for you to kind of gauge out to how you will be proceeding going forward from that, or give you a base guideline at least to kind of your pathway to becoming a dedicated locator service provider servicing your own project, if that's the case.
Okay, is there documentation that we can review on this?
Yes, we can share it to you via email, but it is also available on our webpage. If you go under our webpage there, under who are the parties involved in DL, you can look at it under the dedicated locate service provider. That information should be downloadable in terms of document for the framework that's available, that's set forward now.
All right, and what does this do? Like, I mean, we have emergency locates ourselves that we perform on a daily basis, right? So, but I'm assuming that's still like that falls out of outside the purview of the dedicated locator.
Yeah. So yeah, emergency locates does not apply under dedicated locator. Yeah, just because you have the locator on hand now, and it's strictly just for that project itself. So yeah, really for say the emergency. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Wes. I believe our next question here is with Adam Capin.
Hey, thank you. Just wanted to start off one comment, the notification process. In my opinion, that notification email ideally should be coming from OneCall, not from the LDSP or project owner. The reason I'm raising that, and I'll get into my questions right after, but the reason I'm raising that is like a lot of organizations get tens of thousands of emails, for example, in a day. And we may not be dealing with these DLSPs or project owners on a day-to-day basis. So it doesn't really highlight the start of a 10-day clock ticking in the same way that OneCall, who we do contract with and deal with on a regular basis, sending an email would. Obviously, that would raise attention. So that's one aspect I think maybe you guys should take a look at in terms of who takes responsibility for that initial outreach.
Okay.
In terms of the questions, so the 10-day window for getting an agreement with the DLSP. Now, if we put an agreement in front of them and or the project owner and they do not accept it within 10 days, who takes onus on the impacts and the delays through the negotiation process?
Okay, so to start off with your first question there, the DL project notification does come from our team, our Ontario OneCall team. So it does come from there. in the beginning of the inception of Dedicated Locator, I believe early summer last year, and also throughout the year itself, there's several communication that comes across all members of infrastructure owners in terms of obtaining the right contact people to have for Dedicated Locator on their perspective for, on the member side of things. So that notification does come from Ontario One Call initially. Now, to answer your second question there in terms of within the 10-day, within the 10 days in the agreements of the DLSP, and then if you proceed with the DLSP itself, obviously, if you have an agreement set in place, you can put that forward to the DLSP and the project owner. Now, there may be some back and forth that may occur into that, and that's, that is a standard process. But with that being said, under the Act itself, there is a, there is a portion there where it does say that you and the project owner can agree on an alternative timeline should it be, should it require past the 10-day. So that's something that you can just put in simple writing where if you provide an agreement and there's a back and forth or there's some, there's timelines in between that, the project owner and the member itself can agree on an alternative timeline to ensure that gets resolved.
Okay. And in case of frustration, One Call will mediate?
That's definitely it. Yeah, that's what it is, and that's what our team here is. So we are here to liaison those, those cases where we can mediate on those type of conversation.
Okay. And in terms of, I think there was a comment made, I'm not sure I fully got it right. It was just an offhanded comment, but in terms of the administrative burden, as we now, instead of managing just, one LSP, we're essentially managing data flow and keeping everything up to date and whatnot with potentially multiple DLSPs. The administrative costs, can that be attributed towards a DLSP or project owner?
Yeah, that's something as you as a member that can determine. It's okay. Not something that we can answer, and that's something that you can work with the DLSP or the project owner at this point.
Okay. And in terms of the reasons that we might reject the DLSP, I know that was kind of part of that first, there's an opportunity for us to, I guess, accept or presumably not accept a DLSP for an area. Mm-hmm. So if we already have an LSP and somebody hires a DLSP that happens to be the same company, we have an existing LSP contract that's going to extend throughout that project. Maybe they've been making the performance that they need, or maybe just marginally making it. But is that a valid reason for us to object to a DLSP in the sense that it could put the other contractual obligations and obviously safety of providing locates on time at risk?
It's a valid question there, and it's certainly something that we can look into. But in most cases, so what we see here is as most of these LSPs that are coming through as DLSP, they do have separate entities that are servicing the dedicated locator side of things, and there is a separate entity that's servicing the public side of things to still upkeep with their their responsibilities and contracts and whatnot to the public stream of members that they have in place. So it's not the matter of a resource that's being used to one. Both public and DLSP. A dedicated locator service provider, it's a separate entity at that case where they may have that X amount of locators designated just for that project itself, and then otherwise, obviously they still have to attain their public stream of things.
And is the LSP's ability to perform within the legislated timelines on the non-dedicated stream a condition of them maintaining eligibility on your list? So for example, let's I won't use any names, but let's say a DLSP that does a lot of locating services in the utility sector. Mm-hmm. Let's say that various utilities who use that same LSP are starting to see that they can't make the 5-day timelines. We hear things like we have labor issues, we can't get a hold of people, et cetera, and yet they're acting as a DLSP on your approved list. Is there any recourse for you to remove them from that list on the basis of preferential treatment for the DLSP contract?
So it's not our recourse in terms of Ontario One Call governing that. It's not outside of our call. It's a business perspective part of things. So that's something that you can share that concern with the DLSP itself or the LSP in this in this type of conversation. It's not something from our end that we provide that answer to.
Okay. And then my last question here, and I apologize, I know I've kind of thrown a couple questions out. Other than through a specific agreement with the DLSP, are we notified who the excavator is and when and where they're digging via
Yep.
one call?
So they not via one call directly, because once again, once you're in the dedicated locate model, the notification to your station code is suppressed. Therefore, you're not going to receive those notification of locates being called in under this project. So it doesn't go into your notification, doesn't go into your responsibility to complete the locates under your regular standard public stream. In that case, there is a reverse lookup for members to see performance in terms of locate wise or locate submitted through a particular project within your servicing area. And this is a documentation that we can share with you on a side note. So it's definitely something we can converse with and provide you that documentation, how you can use or utilize our web portal to have that reporting for you to manage in terms of what the locates are being called through under this servicing area and dedicated locator that's servicing within your station code.
So, okay, so they are still required to apply through you
Yes.
each and every single time that they do.
So yes, locates are still required to be submitted to Ontario One Call, but now these, obviously the notification gets taken out of the public stream and just goes to the dedicated locator side stream, but a valid locator is still required.
Okay, because to Brian's earlier point, that's a very important part when it comes to damage investigation for us to figure out who was doing what and where.
Yeah, definitely.
And can we, if we do have, for example, so we have not received any that have anything to do with broadband yet, but they've been just other generalized projects. Now, if somebody has a DLSP, can we reject anything that comes through the normal stream then, if it falls within the similar scope of work?
That's something that you would, that's something you would take back to the project owner. There's some cases where they have separate projects based on separate, scope itself. So that's not something, that we, Ontario One Call, kind of attain in terms of the submission. The submission they provide is they provide the particular scope of work that they'll be using a dedicated locator for. There's some cases where some project owners may use one scale of their type of project under dedicated locator, and some may just go under the regular public stream. But it's something of a concern or something that you can really approach to the project owner at that point and just see how would that look like. If you want to, request to put them under dedicated locator, it's a conversion. It's a conversation you can have with them, but it's
Okay.
not where we govern to say that they have to go under dedicated locator for all projects.
But for all projects where they've applied for a dedicated locator program, must they use dedicated locator for all of those projects?
For the specific ones that they submitted for, yes.
Okay.
So if they have a system in place, then yes. If they approach you or you receive a notification for that particular project and you've gone into agreement, so yes. Once we have set them up with the specific DL IDs, which is what we call contractor IDs in the standard process, this IDs are specific for that particular project. Once that's set up, they the use of the public stream, we do not recommend that. We just, obviously for this project, you have that set up already. So you would use the form of the DL ID at this case. And if you do see that being used, then, it could be a concern that you can share with us as well too.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nothing, no other questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. We have next is Helen.
Hi, thank you. This is
No
Helen from TTC. My question is, for the big project, you ask for the dedicated locator process, but TTC already have, City of Toronto have that permits process, right, for the bigger project. TTC already have a 6-meter buffer zone on both sides of TTC subway. If a big project coming in this protection zone, they have to first come into TTC and for review and approve before they get the permits. So in TTC, we have one, separate review process. This process already including the, the project owner is to do the survey of a subway structure. That TTC also will review this, survey data for TTC location for the conflicts. I think that's a more safe, process. So once this, based on the one call, if this kind of, project coming to, dedicated locator, can we skip this process and say this one to follow TTC review process?
Yeah. So Helen, with this one, it's more so of a case scenario that we would have to further dig into. if you don't mind, I don't really have a direct answer for you. Like I said, we have to better understand what the situation or the case is. Perhaps that maybe if we can set up a time of a call on another, other forum here that we can set up, we can have that personal call directly to kind of go to the the information that you're looking at in terms of this and how we can better approach on that situational basis. So our information is there with the deal at OntarioOneCall.ca. Let's set up a call based on these concerns that you may have, and then we can go more in details based on that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we do. Yes, I have a discussion with Adam right now. Yes. So
Yeah.
we set up a separate call. We have a more question. I think that we are specific, different from other people, right? So
yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a case scenario here where we would have to go more in depth to how that would look like. So I would definitely like to have that conversation on the side here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. We have Rob next on the call here. Rob Kokin.
Yeah, thanks. I'll echo a lot that Lisa and Adam Kaplan said, and so did Brian Elliott. But my question, I guess, just focus on our portal, like where we can see all the locates within our area.
Mhm.
And I think Adam was getting this at one of his last comments. So I understand that like what you're saying about, well, we're not getting the tickets because they're suppressed on your end for dedicated locator excavations, as well as ALAs.
Mhm.
Yeah. So before ALAs and DLs caught on, we were, had the benefit of all excavations that at least were called into one call properly, were logged for a very long time within our within that portal,
Mhm.
and then of course sent to us as well. But now that these excavations aren't logged in the portal, if our infrastructure is damaged and then we go to site, we know where it is, but sometimes our equipment's damaged and then we don't know about it because it was nicked and it doesn't fail until a year or two later. That excavation is not logged for us. And now there's an extra administrative step to hopefully you'll have it on your end and we can dig into it with you.
Mhm.
We used to have this information at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Now, I understand you're saying it's suppressed, but we see suppressed locates in our portal already.
Mhm.
What I mean is we've asked Ontario One Call, since we're an infrastructure owner and an excavator, to suppress our excavations. We see those. So if we call in a locate as an excavator, we see our locate there, but it's suppressed. So just confused on how, as in we can suppress our own tickets and see them, but we're unable to see the suppressed ALAs and suppressed DLs. So we'd like to see all the suppressed ones so that all excavations are here at our fingertips, so that we're aware of the excavation going on around our infrastructure.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a documentation set in place for that. Just give you a little bit of a background here. When we set up a dedicated locator project, and let's say they have civil vendors set up that will be using that model, or just specifically directly to the project owner. When we talk about DLID, their specific DLID for that project only, which will host the suppressions of the members that are included to the dedicated locator model, right? Now, with the creation of that DLID under the company name are very specific. It does say DL in front of it, and it does provide the naming of the DLSP servicing that area itself. So there's this documentation that we'll be happy to share with you as well too after the call, and it's a resource that we'll be posting up to our webpage where a member can utilize our current web portal setup right now, where you can do a reverse lookup of that servicing area that you have, where you can see the suppressed station code that you may have. And at this point now, under a company name, you can able to determine what are the DL project based on the company name itself. So all the the new standard process that are under the new DL model will all have DL naming convection on them, so you're able to pluck that out easily for them. So if you want to get more of a detailed information on that, we can certainly set up a call to kind of run down to take you through it with that. And also just to keep you up, just to get everyone an update on this, we are still working on a portal specifically for a dedicated locator portal, where these access will be will be accessible for all members and all parties involved itself. So it is something in developments that we are in conversation with, but with the current system that we have in place, we do have a reverse lookup that we can show you as a member to do so with those points.
And so I'm just trying to, if we have damaged infrastructure at 123 Main Street, we can't search by address, or are we going to search in multiple portals for this address to see?
No, so the current portal right now, you can provide all those filters too.
Okay.
So within your servicing area, so like I said, we'll set up a call on the side here for you to kind of get through in more details to what you're looking at, and it's possibly that we can assist you on the back end how to do that reverse lookup in terms of our current portal usage. But like I said, with our developments of the new DL portal that's in current conversation right now and in current early developments, this is all taken into factor. So this is something that in the later run would have access for all parties involved under the DL model itself. What I strongly suggest is that when we do provide these project notices or these project setups, there are specific DL IDs, dedicated locator project numbers involved to them. We do provide the DL IDs that are within those projects. One way to keep track of those are what we are seeing right now. Our members are keeping track of those based on areas that these projects are being set up with. So it kind of just gives you a general tracking purpose to these DL IDs being set up in particular areas, who the servicing dedicated locator service provider and who the project owner is. And then from there, we can also show you the web portal portion of it to do the reverse lookup, to look at these tickets in more so in the details in a way for you to do these investigations.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, Rob. Last here we have Monica.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I just want to first thank you for extending the session to address the questions from the members. Speaking as a very small infrastructure owner, I am really concerned about the DL agreements and the burden that's putting on us with dealing with legal services, which of course we do not have in-house. I did reach out to the dedicated locator team last fall and received another model agreement which was revised from the early one, but this is with basically the City of London. Yeah. And it's a 28-page document that is intensely legal, which I understand these documents have to be, but to be able to sit down with our own lawyer and try and work through this to try and adapt it to us is I don't even know where to start with that. And you had mentioned earlier that I don't know if you have a new model agreement that or if this is the one you were referring to earlier in the meeting as a model.
No, we do have.
I just wanted to follow up.
Yeah, we do have a new draft agreement that was set in place, that was set forward for us to be able to share as a foundation. It is more directed towards the the new changes that occurred with the legislation itself too, and some of the new updated. So it's well more updated to what the current version that you may have received. I understand the draft that you may have received was possibly a municipal. More directed to a municipal draft agreement. This agreement is more generalized to as a member itself. So that's something definitely we can share with you. And just going into, yes, I understand the burden into the in setting up the agreements and whatnot. If you have this draft set in place once, that takes away the burden once. Like what Adam mentioned on our previous early on is we are about a year into dedicated locator model now. So this is something that members should have looked at or will be looking into to kind of setting this up. And once it's set up once, and it's something that you don't really, it's something that's a draft agreement that you always have on hand, that when it comes through, it's something that you can be able to share and comfortably share going forward to that. So reach over to us after this call, and we can certainly share that draft agreement, the new updated version, and definitely something that we can have conversation with you on the side as well to kind of go through and what type of information that you may want to include in there. Like I said to the previous members here, where certain stipulation based on your how you want your infrastructure to safely be located.
Okay, I do appreciate that. And that's why we've been trying to be proactive in terms of reaching out and getting the information so that we can have something set up if we're approached to have to deal with a DL situation.
Yes.
But yes,
So
it's just yeah, I think I think part of it is that, and it speaks to something that Lisa had said earlier too, is that yes, the DL information had come out, there was consultation, but it just seems to be so geared to these really large infrastructure owners that it's like the little one that, you know, we're very small and it's like we're being lost in this big system.
But we got to look at it on a other angle on this, is that yes, you may have, you know, you may be a smaller member, but if these large scale projects come through your way as a smaller member, you are more in tune to compile to go through in terms of the load that these projects are bringing onto you. So that is a burden to you as a member on the public stream of things, where now there is, you know, the AMPS administrative penalties involved to, you know, to complying to completion of those locates. So those are things you may want to look at as well too, on the other perspective of how, you know, this is coming through. Yes, you may see that it is geared for larger entities, but really for, say, smaller entities can take benefits to this, because that way you're taking away the loads of large scale projects coming through your side of things. You can still concentrate meeting those compliance. You can still concentrate meeting those public locates on time for legitimate public requests for locates. So, you know, what smaller projects, smaller, you know, homeowner locates and whatnot, compared to fiber to home projects where they're demanding 500 to 1,000 locates, you know, weekly to monthly basis, right? So
yeah, well, we've actually had to deal with the broadband already, and we've managed to cope with it. So I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
thank you.
No problem. Okay, we have about 6 minutes remaining to this Q&A session, and if there's any question that we may have missed, we can certainly take those questions back and then respond to you via email onto our email, reach over to you, and our information is there if you want to reach over to us, get us on a one-on-one call just to kind of go through more in depth and details. Feel free to reach over to us and our team here. You know, we are stressing over here that our team is here for all parties involved to ensure that we are, you know, streamlining and able to roll out Dedicated Locator efficiently and safely, obviously, for everyone here. We will be hosting this member Q&A on a monthly basis, so keep an eye out for an invite for next month's Q&A session. You know, like I said, it's an open forum, so these concerns, these experiences, we want to have them shared through this forum, and perhaps other members may provide positive feedbacks, or other members may have gone through certain experience where they may be able to speak with other members to kind of share that experience through. Okay, with that, I'll just leave that through.